This episode offers psychosocial education designed to inspire and motivate our listeners. The information provided does not constitute a therapeutic relationship nor a substitute for professional mental health care. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, call 911, go to your nearest emergency room, or for listeners in the United States, text 988 for the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Warning, this episode contains brain food that will lead to improved emotional and social intelligence. Thanks for tuning in to Harvesting Happiness today for a healthy serving of consciously prepared brain food. This is Lisa Cypers Kamen, your host. Since 2010, we've been broadcasting sound ideas for better well-being. Each week, we spotlight diverse thinkers and doers who are contemporary trendsetters and change agents, devoting their lives to creating a better world. I invite you to listen and change how you think about human happiness. Our award-winning content is fresh, optimistic, and purpose-driven media that promotes well-being from the inside out. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for joining me on today's show, where you will learn how to make love that lasts. Expert tips for happy and healthy relationships. Portions of this episode originally aired in November of 2023. My guest today is licensed clinical social worker Amy Morin, who is a psychotherapist, internationally best-selling author of 6 books on mental strength, and the award-winning host of the Mentally Stronger podcast. She's been a friend to the show, and I'm so happy to welcome her back to talk about her newest book, 13 Things Mentally Strong Couples Don't Do, Fix What's Broken, Develop Healthier Patterns, and Grow Stronger Together. Welcome back, Amy. Thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me back. I appreciate it.
Well, I love our talks. And I also want to mention that you have one of the most popular TEDx talks of all time. You have kind of a unique, fun, dream-like living situation, which I think is always cool to share with others. Amy lives on a sailboat. Beat that.
Thank you. It's definitely fun. It's hurricane season down here in the Florida Keys. So this is the one time of the year where I do sometimes think, is this really what I want to be doing? But other than that, it's a great life.
A great life and a fertile one for all this creativity that you write and you share with the public. Let's just jump right in to some of the things that mentally strong couples don't do.
Sure.
Because you're a list girl. This is your thing.
I am. And I always talk about, if couples just give up the bad habits that are keeping them stuck, then their good habits become so much more effective. And as a therapist, I would see so many people who be like, yeah, we go on date night, yet we're still struggling. Why is that? So I really wanted to point out, maybe you have a few bad habits. Some of the most common ones that I talk about in the book are that they don't blame each other for their problems.
What?
Right.
I'm not pointing my finger at you. What?
And that's what happens in the therapy office. People usually come in because they want me to fix the other person, right? Like, I'm not here because I want to work on this. I'm here because my partner has a problem or my partner acts out. Or can you just tell them that they need to be doing something differently? And they really get stuck in that blame game. That they don't ignore their problems. Of course, we want to address some problems, but not all. You don't have to bring up every single problem that arises. If you're frustrated that your partner left their socks in the middle of the floor, you don't need to sit down meeting about it. But there are so many problems that couples ignore for years, and they both kind of look the other way, that by the time they come to therapy, sometimes these problems have turned into something huge and they just don't know how to address them at that point.
Let me stop you there and talk about this one for a minute, because when we talk about, you don't need to get into it with leaving socks on the floor. However, sometimes the socks on the floor have a bigger meaning than the socks on the floor.
Correct. And so that's what we often do in therapy, is figure out, is your frustration really the problem? Is it a symptom of a bigger problem? Like, what's going on here? And because the blow-ups often happen about the socks in the middle of the floor. But as you say, that's usually just the icing on the cake. The bigger problem is somebody feels disrespected. Somebody feels like their partner is not pitching in and helping out enough. And because of that, there's a symbolic meaning we make out of that. Like, if you left your socks in the middle of the floor, it's because you don't value my time. You don't value me as a person. And it can turn into something much bigger. And when we don't address those problems, the bigger underlying problems, then resentment builds, and that leads to all sorts of other bad habits. So it's really important to take a look at what problems am I addressing, what problems am I ignoring, and how do we tackle these problems together?
I think it's important to point out that having problems and problem solving are good things.
They are.
We will never be without problems. Like, that's just not going to happen.
I know sometimes couples will be like, well, we never fight. Well, it's good if you never raise your voice or you never call each other names. But on the other hand, like, you should have disagreements sometimes, or you should be able to talk about different perspectives on things like money or parenting or what you want to do on your next vacation. Like, really want to make sure both people can speak up, offer their viewpoints, and that you do have ways to solve those problems. Life is inherently full of problems, and to have a process of how do you decide what to do? One person says, I want to move across the country, and the other one doesn't. Who wins? The person who speaks the loudest, the person who says it's too painful for me to continue, or the person who says, no, I've got it all figured out, and they act like they don't care. So many things go into the way that we solve problems as couples, yet most of us never take a step back and say, what is our process for solving problems?
Talk a little bit more about some of the don'ts, because you talk about, there are a couple that come to mind about the don't keep secrets. I mean, that's the one that I keep going to, because there's certain things that I feel like my partner, he just does not need to know. And they're kind of mundane, but I want you to sort of explain what you mean by that.
Yeah. So this one, it's important to differentiate the difference between secrecy and privacy. So if your friend comes to you and says, hey, I'm kind of having some marital issues, or I'm going through this personal problem, you might decide not to tell your partner. It's none of their business, perhaps, what your friend is going through. And that's not keeping a secret, but you're just holding your friend's information in confidence. And that's part of your private relationship, your private friendship with somebody. Or you don't need to tell them everything that goes on in your life. You and I were talking before about certain habits. Maybe your partner doesn't need to know if you're plucking a chin hair in the bathroom, right? Not something you need to come out and announce. So those little things aren't harmful to the relationship, because those are the things that we keep private. Sometimes couples disagree on issues surrounding privacy. And so it can be important to talk about it. Like if an ex contacts you on social media, how would I expect you to respond to that? Would I want you to come and tell me? Most people would say, yes, I'd absolutely want you to tell me that information. So it's really about our motivation. When we don't tell somebody something, is it because we're afraid of their reaction? Are we afraid that we're going to get in trouble, that we don't want them to be angry? Or is it really just an issue of privacy? Again, even if you're in a long-term committed relationship, you still have a right to hold some things in your life private. And that's a healthy thing.
I think that's a really important point. And oftentimes, the longer we're in our coupledom, the more fused we could become, where it's like my desires or my thoughts should be similar to the others. And that's not the case. In fact, the longer the relationship, the more healthy the relationship, the individuality is prized and celebrated.
Yes. And we want to be able to grow as individuals. And that's what keeps us interested in each other. Being interested in one another and excited and still learning about somebody after all these years is part of what keeps people together. If you just kind of morph into the same person who shares the same social media account, only talks to the same people all day, basically has the same life, it's hard to then keep passion or excitement. Or why do you want to sit down then and have a wonderful conversation? Because you already know everything the other person's going to say. So we definitely want to have our own separate lives so that we do have some things that are private too.
Talk a little bit about boundaries, because you write about that healthy or mentally fit or mentally strong couples don't hesitate to set boundaries with each other, which might be counterintuitive at first.
Right. Because we need boundaries in the relationship with one another. And it might be a boundary of, I'm not comfortable with us loaning money to your sister, or I'm not comfortable with my mother stopping over at random times during the day, or I'm not comfortable with a friend staying on our couch. Yes, they're going through a hard time, but I don't want them moving in with us. So it's important for the couple to have a boundary against the outside world, because you want to make sure that you are protecting your relationship. But it's okay to have boundaries with each other too. Like maybe you say, I don't want you to go through my phone. I don't want you to have all of my social media passwords. I don't want you looking up where I am all the time. Sometimes couples have a thing where they can check one another's location on the phone, and that might be a problem. You might say, I don't want you to know everything about me all the time. And I have those boundaries, or I'm going to take $25 a week and spend it on anything I want. Comes back to that privacy and secrecy issue. And maybe I don't have to account for that. I'm allowed to spend it on anything I want. But on the other hand, we have a shared account. And when it comes to that kind of money, then we need to make sure that we are both responsible with it. And our boundaries might be, let's not loan it out to other people, or let's not give money away unless we've discussed it first, or we're not going to buy something that costs more than $50 without talking to each other first. We all have these unwritten rules, but a lot of times we don't really sit down and discuss what are our boundaries.
Another item on the list is mentally strong couples don't try to fix each other. This is a really good one. Like, I love you. You're fabulous. Now change,
Yes. And we see so much of that in therapy where somebody brings in their partner and says, now, honey, if you just did X, Y, or Z, then you'd be better. Or I'm just trying to make you a better person. We see it often with addiction where somebody's desperate to get their partner to stop drinking or stop doing something that's destructive, and which makes sense. You don't want to see somebody that you love sabotaging, and it affects you too. It could affect your finances and every aspect of your life. But sometimes people put so much energy into trying to fix the other person that they lose sight of what their goals are, what their life is. And then they come to the conclusion, I can't be happy or I can't have a fulfilling life unless you do something different. And it's not always about big things like addiction. Sometimes it's small things where somebody says, you spend too much time watching TV, so I want you to be a more active person and get out of the house more often. And while it's good to want the best for your spouse and we want them to be healthy people, it's when you're so invested in making them different and that you put all of that energy into changing somebody that it becomes destructive.
Let's talk a little bit about going back to setting boundaries where there's procrastination and therefore frustration. How do you counsel people to work with that? One person is a procrastinator, the other is a more of a preemptive list doer. And sometimes that doesn't always run smoothly.
That's a good question, because what we often see is people get into this pattern where the procrastinator has a more relaxed view of, I'll get to it when I get to it. And the partner is like, their anxiety's on the rise and they're like, well, hurry up. Have you done that yet? They sound like they're nagging or that they're rushing. The other person then gets frustrated. Sometimes the partner that doesn't procrastinate just takes matters into their own hands. So I think it's important for us to sometimes just take a step back and look at our personality differences. How do you solve problems? How do you manage these things? And how can we work together so that we aren't just working against each other? So if you know somebody else procrastinates, don't give them a life or death project that's going to give you so much anxiety that you can't stand it. But on the other hand, if they forget to do something or they wait until the last minute and they do make a mistake, it might not affect your life that much. If they are planning a party and they don't get around to it until the night before to actually start planning it, it may not be as bad as you're imagining. To be able to take a step back and figure out, okay, how do I manage myself? And I think a lot of things in a healthy relationship, it really boils down to asking yourself that question. Like right now, do I need to control how I feel or do I need to control the situation? Sometimes we try to control situations rather than just saying, no, my job right now is to just manage my own anxiety and not necessarily try to change what my partner's doing.
I think that's really important, especially the older that we get and the longer the relationship is. You tend to know one another pretty well. You know each other's buttons. And I'm speaking from personal experience because I do live with a procrastinator. But it's like, is this person's procrastination really prohibiting me from loving that person? And I think that's like, to see the bigger picture becomes super important.
Yes, because I think sometimes people are quick to label their partners, like if they're lazy or they're just not motivated enough. And when we label somebody with something like that, we look for behavior that confirms it. And we kind of overlook any behavior or evidence to the contrary. So if I decide my partner's kind of messy or they're lazy or they're a procrastinator, I'll just look for evidence that reinforces that belief all day long. And there's research on this too. And I talk about it in the book, how many times when we get into an unhealthy cycle or a rough patch, we just really magnify the things about our partners that kind of annoy us, and the unhealthy things. We just notice those things so much more, and then we screen out all of the positive things about them.
Well, we tend to, instead of looking in the mirror at ourselves to figure out where we are at with our distress, we want to look outward and see the other person is wrong when they're just being themselves, right? They're just doing them.
Exactly. Yes.
And, the other thing is, I think I want to be clear to say that for me, procrastination and laziness are two different things. That's right. A very separate issue.
Yeah, there's tons of reasons why people procrastinate. Sometimes it's anxiety. Sometimes that's just they function better that way. Sometimes it's just because that's how they operate. But to somebody who isn't a procrastinator, it's easy to draw conclusions that are like, you don't care, you're lazy, you aren't invested in this. And it's easy to draw all of those conclusions. And when people do that, they then think, okay, this person's doing this on purpose, or they just don't care about those things that I care deeply about.
And being able to have that conversation is what we're talking about, right? Like to be able to keep that dialogue open, be able to explain where we're coming from, not personalize it. Because like so often I think that we tend to personalize the behavior of the other, and really people just do what they do, right?
Exactly. And to know that while you can't fix somebody, you can't change them, we can definitely influence people. And any relationship is kind of like a dance. And if you've ever tried to force somebody to dance in a certain way, it doesn't go well if you see somebody that gets dragged out on the dance floor. But at the same time, when somebody's dancing with you and you change your steps, they kind of change their steps based on what you do. Not because you told them that they had to, but just because that's how it works. And a relationship is the same. When I change my behavior, my partner's behavior is going to change. And so while you can't control the other person, you can certainly control your own behavior, how you respond to them, and how you are proactive about certain things.
Let's take a break. And when we come back, we will continue the conversation with Amy Morin. She is the author of 13 Things Mentally Strong Couples Don't Do, Fix What's Broken, Develop Healthier Patterns, and Grow Stronger Together. You can also check out her podcast, the Mentally Stronger Podcast. To learn more, please go to amymorinlcsw.com, on Twitter, Amy Morin LCSW, and Facebook and Instagram, Amy Morin Author. Let's take that quick break. We'll be right back. Harvesting Happiness is rooted in science. Our work facilitates applied positive psychology practices through media and consulting. We're committed to sound ideas for better well-being, leading to increased life satisfaction and a better world for everyone. We're not into pseudoscience or quick fixes. We're focused on common sense backed by rigorous research. Healthy critical thinking is the foundation for our discussions. We encourage you to challenge preconceptions and explore ideas with a curiously discerning mind. Collaboration with our guests is united by an inclusive vision to boost resilience, critical thinking, communication, and problem solving through civilized discourse and pleasurable relational engagement for everyone. Each day, we have the intellectual freedom to be happy or the liberty to be miserable, regardless of external circumstances. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, please seek support because good psychological health is vital to the achievement of a healthy and satisfying life. Visit harvestinghappiness.com for psychosocial and educational services that boost emotional and social intelligence. And we're back, continuing the conversation with Amy Morin about making love that lasts. Expert tips for happy and healthy relationships. Let's get back to it. So, Amy, let's get back to the list. One of the things that you talk about in the book is that mentally strong couples don't use their emotions as weapons. And I'm just eager to talk about this with you because this is where a lot of us do go.
It is. And I think it's tempting sometimes when we raise our voice to be like, oh, I'm just sharing my feelings with you. But then when we uncover like what's really underneath that, you're showing tons of anger, you're pretending like you're just showing your feelings and that it's okay to talk and communicate, but really you're communicating something else. Or I've worked with a lot of couples who will say things like, well, I can't do that because I have anxiety. My partner knows that. And they kind of just shut down. And when we look at what's really going on, it's often anger, anxiety, these things that are used as weapons. And people will pretend like they're helpless. Like, I can't talk about money because of my temper. Or, I can't make these phone calls because I have anxiety, or you expect too much of me, but I have a lot of stress right now. And they just really shut down, or they're using their emotions in a way to try to get their partner to behave in a certain way. And it's more of a manipulation tactic rather than a genuine struggle with emotion regulation.
And this applies not just to our romantic partners. This applies to any relationship, whether it's an intimate family member or a coworker. I mean, people tend to weaponize their emotions.
They do. When your boss raises their voice, they might be angry, but they might also just be trying to get employees to behave a certain way. And it's not something that we talk about very often. We tend to think that when people are expressing their emotions, if they talk about their feelings, then somehow it must be genuine. But that's not always the case. In fact, it's quite often. And when we interviewed people for the book, about 37% of people said, yeah, my partner definitely uses their emotions as a weapon sometime. And so I think we're starting to recognize this more and more, because it used to be the idea was if somebody says, well, I'm just expressing how I feel, like it was okay for them to act like a jerk. And now we're catching up to the idea like, no, you can express your feelings in a different way. It's okay to feel something, and experiencing an emotion is one thing, but the way you express it is something different.
And the flip side of it is somebody who is manipulating the situation with their emotions and not really being emotionally honest. In other words, they might cry, right?
Yes.
I can't take it. This is the worst experience of my life. And the other person might say, well, hang on, you need to get a grip on reality here. This is a really terrible situation. We need to pay attention. And the other person may escalate because they're trying to get that person to snap out of it. I'm thinking of that Moonstruck moment, the snap out of it, Loretta.
Right.
So it goes both ways.
It certainly does. And sometimes people will say things like, I have too much stress, so I can't handle the taxes this year. You have to do it. But on the other hand, sometimes a partner will get mad and raise their voice and say something, and the other person's like, "Ooh, I better do this." So I think it's just so important for us to take a closer look at our emotions, how we experience them, how we express them. And it goes back to decision making. Sometimes couples get into this almost competition of how much pain they're in. Like, I can't stand it. If we have to move to a new city, then I'll be crushed. So therefore we have to stay here. And the other person says, well, I'll be crushed if we don't move, or I'm going to be crushed if it doesn't go my way. And like, how do you decide who wins? Whoever says that they're in the most pain gets to have their dream come true, and the other person doesn't. So I think it's so important for us to just take a look at, how do we show empathy for each other? You want to believe your partner when they're saying, hey, I'm really anxious or I'm sad, and you want to be supportive of one another, but you just want to make sure that you don't break trust by exaggerating your emotions or using them in a way that's really about a manipulation tactic.
Another form of a manipulation tactic, the quantum you always.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you always do this, you always do that. That's unfair. That's like not fighting fair. That's not cool.
Right. And on the flip side is you never listen to me. You never do anything. You never want to do all the things I want to do, without being able to give those specific examples, and to be able to, right in the moment, be able to say, all right, let's talk about this. But those sweeping generalizations could certainly be harmful.
What about the deflector? The one who doesn't fight fair, in the sense you're talking about something, you're having an argument, which is not such a bad thing sometimes. And the other person will sort of throw the curveball. Well, what about the time when you did this or that was kind of similar? But wait, no, dude, we're talking about this time,
And that is a common tactic of bringing up all the times. If you're going to say that I hurt you, I'm going to bring up the 400 times that I felt hurt. Or I'm going to be like, wait, you're mad about that? Well, what about what you did yesterday? Yeah, as a way to try to say, let's derail the conversation, and not taking responsibility. If my feelings are hurt, then it's my job to address that in the moment, not save that up for the next time when you mention that you're upset about something, and then I toss it all back at you.
At the kitchen sink argument, right? That's kind of what I call it. Like, you're upset about one thing, and then sort of every little transgression in the history of the relationship is brought into the conversation. It causes everybody to spark out. Not
and
cool.
Sometimes it's not on purpose. So we know that memories in our brain are stored kind of like in a file cabinet. So when you're angry, and you feel angry, all of a sudden you'll remember every other time you've been angry. So all of a sudden you start taking out all these files, not because you necessarily mean to drag up all of those things, but those memories are all triggered in the exact same part of your brain. So when you remember that one time you were angry, you can quickly remember 17 other times that you felt that emotion.
That's good to be aware of. I didn't think of it in that way, to have the awareness that we're getting into sort of the stew pot
right.
of emotions. And that's where being able to self-regulate and self-soothe is so important, right? Because it helps de-escalate the situation.
It does. And to recognize when your emotions are genuinely to that point that you're not going to have a productive conversation, and then to have some skills. So sometimes couples will say, well, we take a break, but when she walks off, I follow her because we're not done the conversation yet, or I feel abandoned when she walks off. So it's important to find ways to say, well, let's take a break, but we're going to come back and revisit it. You don't just want to walk away from a discussion about money and leave it hanging. You want to say, I need 20 minutes to go for a walk. And then when I come back, I'll feel calmer. And then we could discuss this in a more productive way.
I love the timeout, right? Like we put ourselves in timeout. Grown-ups, true grown-ups are able to put themselves in timeout.
Yeah.
I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
And there's nothing wrong with doing that, but to be able to have the self-awareness to know my anger is starting to rise. I need to take action now before I get to that point. And from the research, we know too that as our emotion goes up, our logic goes down. So if you were to take an IQ test when you're really angry, you would score terribly on it because we're not as bright when we're angry. And so you want to make sure if you're going to sit down and have a serious conversation, whether it's about money or parenting or some other disagreement, you don't want to be angry. You need your IQ as high as it possibly can be. You want to be calm when you have that conversation.
Yes. Calm and clever and able to navigate, from a very, very grounded place. And I get it. Let's talk about neglecting the partnership. Because again, when the longer we're in our relationships, the more comfortable we become. And people who are in healthy, strong relationships don't do that.
Right. It's tough not to do though, because we're like, my job needs a certain amount of energy and effort. My perhaps aging parents, my children, my friends, my extended family, all of these people in our lives are vying for our attention, these certain things that we have to do, all of these responsibilities that we have. So it's really easy to be like, well, I'll address my relationship later, or we'll spend time together later, or when things slow down. How often do we say that? Like, when things slow down a little bit, then I'll figure that out. But life really never slows down. It's fairly constant that things are busy. And when we have certain seasons in our life when maybe you can't put in as much energy, if you're caring for an elderly sick parent, that may take a lot of your spare time for a while. But have a conversation about that. That says, after work and in the evenings, I'm not going to be able to be home very much right now because I have this other thing going on. But how do we still take care of our relationship? And it might be that you connect for 10 minutes a day where you just sit and talk without any outside distractions, but you make sure that you set that time aside so that you can connect. And then to say, and what are we going to do to keep nurturing and growing our relationship? Because boredom kills relationships when we get stuck in that rut and we get into that cycle of just kind of like, you go to the same restaurant every once in a while, but the fun stuff is for the kids, or the exciting stuff is what we do with our friends on a girlfriend's weekend, one weekend a year, but we don't do exciting things with our partners. And that can really be unhealthy for our relationship. And it's actually one of the biggest reasons why relationship dies. It's not because of having too much conflict. It's because people have neglected their relationships to the point that they just grow apart.
So keeping it fresh, keeping it curious, changing things up. These are some of the ways I'm hearing you suggest that we nurture our relationships.
Right. Invest time and do exciting things together. So when you do something fun, your brain doesn't really care who's next to you. You'll like that person a lot better. And it's really important to like your partner after you've been together for 5-10 years. And so you want to go do really fun things together, whether that for you as a couple, that's going to a park or a museum, or it means that you go do something exciting. You travel to a new city. Make sure you're doing fun things together, and then you still like each other and you have a strong friendship there too.
Good point. Like when we're undergoing really stressful times, whether it's raising children or tending to older parents, or the workload is really, really high, taking time to enjoy one another and do something fun and different is important. And it does revitalize things. It goes a long way, right? It's like medicine.
Yeah, it certainly does. And then when we have fun together, we feel better. We feel better about the relationship. It's a great stress reliever. But so often that just falls pretty far down on our priority list to go do fun things together as a couple.
So if you were to identify like the top 3 things that we could do right now, like after we're done with this podcast, we get on the phone or we start texting our partners, what are like 3 things that you can say we can do today to give the relationship a positive boost?
Number 1 would be retell your love story of how you met and why you fell in love in the first place. And remembering that can help rekindle a lot of those emotions and remind you why it's worth sticking in there and getting through the tough times. Number 2 would be practice reflective listening. So often when we talk to the other person, we just want to express our viewpoint. Show that you can actually listen by just repeating back what they say. Oh, so you say you had a rough day at work. Your boss said this, and this is how you replied. And you're thinking about having a meeting about it tomorrow. Did I get all that right? If you just listen to other people more, it would make a huge difference. So I think listening would be another one. And a third one would be to assume goodwill. So often we think if our partner is 10 minutes late, it's because they don't care about us. Let's take a breath and say, what's an alternative way to look at this? Maybe they had a stressful day. Maybe they're doing the best they can. And maybe when they say these things, it's not really meant to hurt us. It's just because of something going on in their own lives. But if we just assumed goodwill, things would get a lot better too. And we'd be more compassionate.
I love that. Assume goodwill, like see the glass as half full in a certain sense, right?
Right.
Well, this has been great. And, as always, I love talking with you on the show. I love sharing what you're up to, all your fabulous lists, the do's and the don'ts. And to learn more about Amy Morin, please go to amymorinlcsw.com. On Twitter, that handle is the same at Amy Morin LCSW. On Facebook and Instagram, Amy Morin Author. We're talking about Amy's newest book, 13 Things Mentally Strong Couples Don't Do. Fix what's broken, develop healthier patterns, and grow stronger together. Also, check out Amy's podcast, Mentally Stronger. Amy, as always, thanks for hanging out with me.
Thank you so much for letting me be here today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for joining us today on Harvesting Happiness. This is Lisa Cypers Kamen on behalf of my guest, Amy Morin, wishing you kind thoughts, kinder words, and the kindest of actions. Until next time, remember, happiness is an inside job. Happiness is your inside job. Please go out and rock your day and remember to be kind to one another. Want to explore more sound ideas for better well-being? Check out our new bonus edition content at More Mental Fitness by Harvesting Happiness on Substack and Medium. Subscribe, listen, and share hundreds of downloadable episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Connect with and follow us on most social media channels. To learn more about lifestyle management and mental fitness consulting services, please visit harvestinghappiness.com. Harvesting Happiness and More Mental Fitness are produced by Lisa Cypers Kamen, Andrea Mengele, Robin Boyd, Andrea Daly, and the excellent team at Podfly Productions, including Eric Begay, Kimberly Beck, and Alec Guess, in collaboration with TogiNet Radio, KBUU, RadioMalibu.net, and is available on PRX, the Public Radio Exchange.